So being able to let that go and move forward with life is a tough call, but nobody gets by with anything. There is justice with God, and I trust that. He's the one that says, "Vengeance is mine," says the Lord, "and I will repay." So I really have to trust that kind of justice at the end of all things and realize that I can't do nearly as good a job of that as God can.
Right. And I think too, Lee, one of the things that I noticed whenever I held on to a lot of the bitterness that I did for years was that I was angry just to other people that were kind to me. It was not only that I couldn't forgive the person that had wronged me, but it was also that I just was an unhappy person, and I sheltered myself away from others. Is that pretty much a normal normal outcome whenever you're holding on to that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Because uh, in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 15, there's a warning that's giving there. It says, "Beware lest any of you fail of the grace of God." And what that means is if I don't take hold of the grace that God has extended to me, it says that a root of bitterness can begin to spring up inside of me. And because that, I'm troubled. And then it goes on to say, and many others are troubled as well. So there is this progress of the growth of bitterness in my life. It darkens my view of the world and other people. I begin to trouble myself by withdrawing and treating other people inappropriately. And then other people are harmed by my darkness, by my bitterness. I'm not as considerate of them. So it is a universal thing that the more bitterness I hang on to, the more damage I do to myself and to other people as well.
And I want to talk specifically about some of that just from a health standpoint, the mental anguish, what it can do to you mentally, what it can do to you physically. But let's back up and let's just say that because I have been in this situation with you. Uh, you find out something in your life has happened, and it can be anything, and it can be you find out that your child has betrayed you by getting into drugs, and it's just devastated everything you've worked for to raise a child, or your spouse has cheated on you, or whatever the case may be. Fill in the blank. Walk into the office, and let's just take it on one that a lot of people can relate to. They sit down in your office, and one spouse says, about the other, he's cheating on me, she's cheating on me, and our marriage is, I cannot, because the initial gut reaction in that situation, Lee, is the marriage is over. I can't forgive, I can't move on, and that's just what you're supposed to do. So where do you start that healing process to just get people to some sort of a neutral footing to where they can start the building process from, I mean, just I've been there. There's a shock factor that you got to work through. Then the forgiveness almost comes like a few stages later and sometimes years later. So where does the process begin?
Well, forgiveness is a process. It's not something that there's a switch that I can flip.
Yep.
So the thing I would do first with someone is just empathize with them for a while and just sit with them in the sorrow, the sadness, the brokenness that they're experiencing, and allow them to feel that, to let them know that's okay. If you're hurting, you should be hurting. If you've been betrayed by someone, damaged by someone, I want you to get in touch with that and be aware of it, acknowledge it, to accept that as a painful event, uh, and then realize that I have to make a decision now, eventually, what I'm going to do with that. It's not something that happens again quickly, but it happens over time as I begin to realize possibly I can forgive this person. Um, I do want to help you realize that forgiveness and trust are not the same thing.
Talk about that. I think that's huge.
It's a very important concept. If I go to the bank and I borrow $1,000 and I'm a deadbeat and I don't pay them back, uh, I eventually expect that that bank, because it's $1,000, will just write that off as a bad debt. And several years down the road, it's just going to be wiped out of their books because it's not worth carrying. But if I found out about that and I called them up and said, "Hey, listen, thanks so much for forgiving that debt. Could I borrow another $1,000? It was really nice last time." they're going to laugh at me because they're going to think, well, no, we don't trust you. So they've forgiven the debt, what I owed them, but they are still not going to trust me to loan me anything else. So there may be occasions where the damage that someone has done to you is repeated over and over, or is just too deep in my heart, that I can't trust them, but I have to release what they owe me and set that aside. I believe it's a Native American proverb that says, when one man forgives, there are two prisoners that are set free.
Mm,
Uh,
yeah.
I'm tied to that damage and that hurt unless I'm willing to let it go.
I like that. There are two prisoners set free. And I think that's one of the things that for me, that I think being on the other side of forgiveness, that I probably didn't realize until I think that was kind of the, I guess the marker that showed, okay, I guess I have made it through this, is whenever there is a freedom. I no longer the bitterness, when all of a sudden you recognize and you almost recall it. And I think that's one of the things too, Lee, is so we as believers, and we hear all the time that, I grew up hearing that God forgives and forgets.
Mhm.
And as a child and even as a young adult, I thought, well, okay. But then it was one of our fellow church members once said to me, and in one of our small groups, he said, "No, look, it's not that God forgives, it's that he chooses not to remember." I'm pretty sure he still knows the story of David and Bathsheba. Pretty sure he remembers that, as well as all the other stories, right? So going to what you're talking about, the loan analogy makes perfect sense. But whenever you're in a marriage, there comes a point, there's somebody out there that says, "Okay, Lee, but I've got children. And so I've got to keep making this loan, if you will, of trust. I have to keep exercising this trust." How does that get built back? And what is the burden of responsibility on both sides? Because that's one of the things that I've had to learn walking through this process with you all these years, is that it's not just, it can't just be, okay, me saying, "I forgive you," and then letting the other person tap dance and perform, until all of a sudden I go, "Okay, okay, fine. You've done enough. I get it. You meant it. You're going to be good." So what are some of the elements of responsibility to build that trust back?
Well, I found that one person really cannot build trust back between two people. Reconciliation always requires two people working at it. If I'm the one who has harmed you, I have a responsibility to do three things for you. I have to have very consistent behavior in the area where I've broken your trust. Then I have to have some form of accountability so that you can know that, verify that. And then I have to give you time. I can't expect you to forgive me tomorrow for 6 months of infidelity, for example. Uh, I can't just flip that switch that quickly. So I want those three elements: consistent behavior, accountability, and time to be a part of what I'm doing to rebuild your trust. So I think there's a time for a really good apology where I'm coming to you and seeking your forgiveness, letting you know what I'm doing so this doesn't happen again, trying to restore things with you. There's a lot that has to be done in a really good apology. Uh, so when I've got somebody who's willing to do that with the person that they've harmed, then I move over to the other person and I start talking to them about the levels of risk that they're facing. Uh, what are some things that my spouse, for example, can do where I won't feel too risky, but I'm willing to extend that risk? And I have to kind of increase that over time so that things get more and more back to normal. Is that making sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And so whenever you start this working process, so I could see instances where, a couple out there that may hear this. I hope that someone forwards this to someone that they know that's going through something, and they go, "Hey, you should listen to Jason and Lee talk about this stuff." And so let's say it's let's just, again, let's keep it with the cheating analogy, because I think that's just so, I mean, let's face it, that's a pretty common occurrence. I'm sure that you deal with a lot. And the spouse that has done the cheating says, you know what, if you're going to treat me like this, if you're going to constantly go into my Facebook and ask me about text messages, what does that conversation look like to where the offender, it seems to me they need to take some responsibility to say, I can't hold this against them. But on the other side of it too, the one who is asking to allow a little more infringing of their personal space to build the trust back, they need to. There seems like there's a risk there of, okay, I don't want to push this person away, just make them continue the behavior, because yes, they verified that they are a cheater, and now I'm going to treat them like a cheater. And then how do you walk that fine line to where it's both parties, I guess the offender saying, I get it, I'm going to endure this for a while. To say I asked for this is kind of whatever, but my actions have led this to happen. And then the other one to go, I know there needs to be a timestamp on this at some point. I can't be 5 years from now saying, hey, where were you? And let me see your text messages. How do you balance that so that it builds towards, hey, we do have trust. We love each other so much. Golly, I mean, it sucks that we had to go through that, but we went through it and here we are now. Kind of what does that balancing act look like?
Well, if you think about it, there is a cross-shaped graph that happens at times like this. When my trust is really low, my need to check is very high. But as trust continues to grow, my need to check will be very low. And so over time, that process will just happen automatically. A couple of things that are a part of that, though, I'm a firm believer that if a couple is married, they need to have open policy for emails, Facebook accounts, Instagram, Snapchats. They need to have absolute open access to each other's accounts, simply because it eliminates questions. It prevents some things. If there's accountability in relationships, which I'm a strong believer in, it eliminates some possibilities of things that of people being tempted. Anyone is capable of being tempted. David was a man after God's own heart, and he failed to temptation. So I want open policy. And what I'm hoping for, and I talk and coach couples through this, that whoever's the offender, the lady or the man, needs to be totally open to their spouse, give free access, unfettered, unhindered, no anger about it, just absolutely. You want to check, here it is, here's my phone, here's my email, absolutely. If I want trust, the moment I hesitate, I lose ground. But if I give that open access, then over time, I also work with the offended party to choose not to check. The intentional process where I'm saying, okay, yes, I'm feeling anxious today. I'm feeling the need to check, but today I'm choosing not to check. And this is a gradual process too, where their strength in facing those risks builds up over time, and they're actually able not to check anymore and to release that. I think that that's a process that I take couples through, try to coach them through that process.
And I guess that's also too, I would think that, okay, forgiveness, again, even purely as a selfish matter, is no matter who the other party, yes, the risks are there's more, the stakes are higher, rather, I guess, for a couple with children and a family as to walking through the forgiveness process than say my buddy just really, ticking me off, saying something rude to me and holding bitterness against him forever. So I guess there's a calculation to be made there. Now, I want to take and the reason why I talk about stakes is because one that kind of fits, not the close friend, it's bigger than that, but maybe not quite as consequential as my spouse, is one that you and I have talked about a lot. It's the parents. There's a lot of adults and manly. And if you want to talk about this, what I'm about to say, and kind of the psychology of this, one of the things I've learned as a 46-year-old man of late is that I think I'm getting better about this, but for me personally, at 46, in the presence of my father, I'm 15, 16. There's something about there. It's not, I have to really consciously stop and go, wait a minute. I'm nearly a 50-year-old man. Why do I have this just all of a sudden? I don't know if I'd call it weakness, but inferior, something about it. There's this that's just, and so there's that psychology, but then there's also something that I think the thing that I came to see you about last is like there was some bitterness I was holding towards my father, and I'm scared to death of him leaving this world. And I've gone through times where I thought, if that happened and we didn't leave on good terms, I wouldn't care. And because I've had quote unquote loved ones pass that felt nothing, didn't like them, just they're gone. Didn't feel much different than when they were here. But with my dad, I know the stakes are higher.
Yeah.
Uh, in your experience, and again, for that listener out there that's just out there going, hadn't talked to my dad, hadn't talked to my mom in 4 years, and I don't give a damn. Not going to. If they died tomorrow, I wouldn't care. Are most of those people right or wrong?
Well, they're wrong. Everybody's going to care if their parents pass away. The ones that have the most difficult time with grieving them are the ones that are either very, very close to their parents or very, very distant from their parents.
Oh, wow.
If they're very close, then they're just missing that presence, missing the positive energy they get from these people and the encouragement, the unconditional love that they receive from their parents growing up. But if they're very distant from their parents, there's typically regrets. There's thoughts, well, I could have done that better. I wish I'd spent more time with them. There's a lot of sorrows and regrets that come up in the grief around that. Some of the regret is just regret that their parent never got it. Do you understand what I mean by that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think many people will relate to that, I want and wish that I could have had this relationship that, like these other people over here, where I had a mom and a dad that were just there and invested in me, that were my greatest cheerleaders. And I've missed out on that. And it breaks my heart because of that. But I'm so sad they never got it. They never saw the value that they could add into my life. I've missed out on their blessing, in other words.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the thing I think that's one of the things that's been tough for me is less, my relationship with my dad in particular has been such an up and down to the point where there's probably some cynicism that's creeped in. It's like, even if it's good, well, it's got an expiration date. It will turn sour at some point. And I think that, the last time that you and I were together, you gave me a good exercise. And I'd like you to kind of talk through that about the distance between hate and love, and then trying to kind of reach that happy indifference position, or just a kind of a more neutral setting, if you will. Kind of talk to the listeners about that, because I found that pretty helpful for me.
Okay. There's several things that surround that whole concept. But if you think about a graph, hate and love are over here in this U-shaped graph. Hate and love are on this side of it. And there's a lot of emotional investment needed for both of those. If I love someone, then there's a lot of positive emotion invested in that. But if I hate someone, I'm having to work at maintaining that anger, that frustration, that difficulty. And so there's still a lot of emotional investment. Over on this side of the graph is indifference. I just don't care to be around them, don't care about them at all. So a lot of things have to happen when you're dealing with someone who has consistently hurt you in some way. You kind of have to think about them as if they're radioactive. I don't know if this makes sense to you or not, but think about 3 things that you would do if someone is radioactive. First of all, before I am around them, I'm going to suit up. If I go into radiation, I'm putting on that gear, whatever I can get on me. And what that means is mentally and emotionally, I'm going to prepare myself. I'm going to pray up. I'm going to acknowledge to myself that this can be difficult. This is the kind of person I'm dealing with, and just get that set in my head. I'm suiting up. The second thing I can do with difficult people who have continually hurt me through the years is that I can put some limits on my time with them. If you think about a person who's a X-ray technologist, for example, they have a little badge that they wear. It's a radiometer, and it tells them when they've had enough exposure.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to know that for yourself. I'm not going to go spend 3 days with my dad if he's the toxic one, or Aunt Sally if she's the mean one. I'm just going to spend 30 minutes with them, or 3 hours with them, or whatever I can muster. But I need to know my limits and put that boundary around that. And then the third thing that I want to do is, if I'm around them and the radiation starts leaking, if you get that analogy,
Absolutely.
then I'm going to excuse myself. I'm going to be polite. I'm going to say, hey, great to see you. I've got to go. Lots of other really important things have got to get done today, clip my toenails, all that stuff. Whatever it may be. But I'm going to get out of there, because I'm not going to stay in an exposed position to all that heat coming my way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's one of the things that I think that's one of the things that's really helped me. And Gemlin has been a huge part of this process for me. Is like before we went to we traveled with my stepmom and my dad to Colorado to see Abby here recently. First time we traveled with them in quite a while, and I really didn't know what to expect, but I did start to play some of the recurring conversations that generally happen, and it went better. I found that was a very good strategy, just to, and it's a shame almost that you can't just go in freely and know that it's a safe place where there's no one here that's offended or in has any desire to offend. And then I think, Lee, one of the things too that I have started to do that's really helped is just to not to put myself above anybody by any means, but to just to understand others' weaknesses and their insecurities and their hurts and the things that I wish I could remember who it was that I read a book where the suggestion was essentially that anyone that's reacting to you in a certain way is not, it's learned behavior, and it's all based on their life's experiences. And and granted, we can all only be so magnanimous. And that's one of the things I think that frustrated me so much about some of the relationships in my family. It's like, okay, at some point you need to do what I'm doing, which is I'm going to turn the mirror on myself and go, hey, I'm capable of being very defensive in this area, reacting in this area. So you need to do that too. This can't just be a one-way street where I'm the one always taking accountability for my actions, but you just get to go willy-nilly. I think, but I finally got to the point where even that, it's one of those deals where, yeah, everyone panders to this person, allows them to be who they are, hurt who they want. And that's just the deal. And I tell you, one of the strategies that you mentioned there was the timeline, that the limiting the amount of time. And
Yeah.
it's funny because there are a lot of people I can only handle so much time with before it's time to go. And I was just having this conversation with somebody, was griping about a particular politician,
Right.
and it was the darling of a certain group. They had loved this guy. I mean, he walked on water, but now he's been in office for going on a decade. And I said, the thing about an elected official is eventually they stick around long enough to be less and less pure. It's just the nature of the game, and they stay long enough, and all the warts. You just have too much time to sit there and look at the muck. The beauty wears off. It's kind of like, that's I think how people are. It's like we are around them so long to where all of a sudden it's the best part of what we're doing right now with the holidays. The
Yeah.
best part of getting together with family is that first 5 minutes when you pull up in the driveway, or if it's for Christmas, you got the gifts and you're getting them out of the car. Everybody's excited. But then, man, after about 2 or 3 hours, after you've been there and the memories of, bitterness stuff start to boil up, that's when it's like, oh, I gotta get out of here. So I mean, I will say that's something I've started to really implement, that it's just being prepared. And I hate that you have to do that, but that has really worked. Now, talk to me a little bit, and if you know some of these numbers or just some of the research that maybe you've done, because a lot of what I talk about in the show is just pure health and wellness and the heart, both the physical and the emotional state of the heart. So, what does research show that the health, um, some of the health issues that can come with carrying bitterness for long periods of time? What results can one see in that regard, if any?
Okay. I'm going to go back to something you said just a minute ago, and then I'll come back to that
Okay.
question. One of the things you said reminded me of a phrase that we use a lot: hurting people hurt people.
Amen.
And that's very important to understand.
Agree.
And also, when I'm dealing with people, I want to set my expectations to my known reality. This is a skill that's hard to develop.
What does that mean, Lee? But that your known reality.
Okay. I know this person. I've been around them all my life. I know exactly what they're going to be like. Uh, Barring a miracle from God, they're going to be tough to deal with. They're going to be harsh. They may drink too much at the party. They may do all kinds of things. That's my known reality of them. So if I go into a situation where they're at, and I'm expecting them to be up here when my known reality is that they're here, now I've got the problem.
Got it.
That's me uh, messing up, because I need to think about, this is who they are. This is what I've always known them to do. And so I want to set my expectation here. So what if they've had a real change of heart and they've gotten sober or whatever it may be, and they're doing much better? If I go in here and they act up here, then I get joy, excitement, gratitude. I get all these wonderful feelings.
Yep.
But if I'm setting my expectation here and they're still coming in here where they've always come, then I've got disappointment, frustration, hurt feelings. And I'm just trying to avoid that with people. What do you know about this person? What are they like, uh, generally speaking? And can I go in just expecting that? So if it's better than that, hey, that's a win for me.
Yep.
But I don't want to go in here because I don't want the loss. So if you're thinking about dealing with bitterness over the long haul, to me, the first step in forgiveness is acknowledging that I'm bitter, because that's a very important thing, just to recognize that before God and be aware of it myself. In the book of Proverbs, says bitterness dries the bones. And I think there's some really interesting things around that scripture. But what we know for sure is that bitterness creates a lot of chemistry from stress. The part of our brains that deal with stress, really, there aren't any gray cells there. They don't know much about anything. There's no logic. They just emote. They have feelings. And as we are bitter against people and we have this harshness going on, that builds up a lot of chemistry in our system, very similar to being chased by a lion. So that can eat you away from inside. It's that fight or flight syndrome. So you're constantly on edge. You're constantly watching. You're ready to bow up at people. You're ready to just get away from them. So there's a lot of avoidance, a lot of argumentation that can come out of that kind of hanging on to bitterness. You have to really be careful about that.
And it's interesting that you said it. So, Dr. Stephen Hussey, I had an interview with him earlier this week, and we were talking about the heart, and that's one of the things he talked about. Is a lot of people, they don't really understand the ramifications that stress, for the reason you just said. We as humans are the only animal who will simulate in our mind the stress and can create the stress without it actually happening. So we can make the chemical reaction of a lion chasing us, we can create in our head. No other animal does that. And so to apply that with the stress that comes from bitterness and unforgiveness, is the same. So eventually, like from a biological standpoint, you are harming your heart physically. And that's one of the that just blows me away. That the old saying, cliche, whatever you want to call it, of not forgiving someone is like drinking poison, hoping the other person will die, is so spot on, right?
It really is. There's a man by the name of Robert Sapolsky. He teaches out at, I think, UCLA Berkeley. He's a primatologist. On his off times, he's in Africa studying primates. But he wrote a wonderful book about stress and its impact on us. It's called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And it's a really great book.
I've heard of the book. I've heard of that.
And the reason they don't is they don't have any anticipatory anxiety.
Yeah.
They don't think about their 401k going south. They don't think about their health going bad. They're going to get up, they're going to eat grass. If a lion comes up, they're going to kick and run. If they survive that encounter, they're going to go back to eating grass. If they don't survive it, then there's no worry there either. It's all gone. But we are much more complex than that. And so we have to get to the place that we can forgive people, even if I don't ever give them a chance to hurt me again, if I don't give trust to them anymore. I have to let go of that pain and that destructiveness so that I can move on. That forgiveness process. It's a challenge.
And that's one of the reasons why I'm hoping that some of the people listening to this will reframe it in that light, that I'm not just, I mean, granted, it's magnanimous and it's a good thing to do. Say, I'm forgiving you as an act of grace and a gift to you. That's awesome. But also as part of just an overall health and wellness perspective. I'm doing this for me. I am forgiving, I'm giving grace, and I'm letting go of these burdens for me because I know I will be healthier. Now, like any other muscle, Lee, it has to be flexed and exercised. And so what are some practical things that someone can do that is either in the height of the, they've just learned of the betrayal, or they're 2 years out and they're still struggling, but from a daily perspective, what does it look like outside of in the moment where I face that person and they're just boom in my face. And so now I've really got to exercise my forgiveness muscle because there you are and we're under the same roof and we got to make this work. But when I'm not there, what can I, because that's when I know for me, a lot of the unforgiveness I've dealt with in my life, that's when it would happen, is when the other person wasn't even near. They're not even around. But then all of a sudden the movie starts playing in my head. What are some practical applications to shut that movie off, turn the channel, and to work in those isolated moments to not give in to that abyss that is bitterness and unforgiveness?
Very good. Like I mentioned a while ago, the first thing that I want to do is just acknowledge that I am bitter, to recognize that in me. I personally like 3 things that people can do without the other person at all, without communicating with the other person, just you and God. Okay. The first one is going before the Lord, acknowledging to Him, Father, I've become bitter at this person. They've hurt me so deeply. It's been so bad. I'm hanging on to it. I realize it's there. I know that's not your plan, but it's there and it's real. And just acknowledging that before God. God is not going to be surprised by anything we tell Him because He knows it's already in there. So we might as well just acknowledge that. The second part of that is I want to ask the Lord to restore my soul. If you think about it, we're 3-part beings. We have our spirit, which is our capacity to know and to relate to God. I think that's the thing that separates us from the animals, generally speaking, that we have this capacity to relate to God. They also have a soul. They have that's the Greek word is psyche, which is the mind, the will, and the emotion. Well, dogs have a mind of their own. They're chewing up your slippers and you don't want them to. They're making messes and sometimes they know it. And they have emotions and they have a will. So they do all the things that we do psychologically, not to the same depth probably, but at least they have those. And then we have a body, those 3 things. So what I want to realize that it's the soul part, that psychological part of us, our mind, our will, and our emotions, where we hold on to this pain. It's how we're thinking about this other person and the event that caused us harm, how we feel about that, what we do about that, how we treat them because of that. And so I'm thinking, who do we know that can restore souls? Well, that's not you and me. If you go back to Psalm 23, that everyone knows, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. And then he says, he restores my soul.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to go before the Lord and say, Father, I need your help here. I can't heal this on my own. The other person's not coming to ask forgiveness. They're living their life. And I need you to restore my soul. And then the third thing is I'm going to begin this process by something that everybody tells me I'm crazy about, but it really is important. And that is I'm going to start announcing my forgiveness of my offender. Whether I feel it or not, I'm just going to start announcing it. And people tell me all the time, well, I don't want to lie. Well, I'm not asking you to lie. I know where you are. God knows where you are. But if you can begin the process by announcing, Father, right now, I fully, freely forgive this person for the hurt that they brought into my life. And I release that to you. That is such an important thing. I don't want you to go, this is my personal preference. I don't want people to go tell someone else they forgive them unless the other person has asked.
Ah.
And the
So
reason,
the person has asked for forgiveness, or the person has asked them, did you forgive? So tell me.
no, if a person has come to me and asked, would you forgive me?
Got it.
Right. Then I'm going to tell them, absolutely.
Okay.
I've released that 2 years ago
Okay.
because if, say, for example, let's say that you said something about me that hurt my feelings. So I call you up and say, well, Jason, I heard what you said. And I just want you to know I forgive you. Well, that just comes across as awkward and maybe even a prideful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go down that road. If they ask, then if I've done this work, the beautiful thing will be that I can tell them, yes, I completely forgive you. I've released that a long ago. I worked this out with God. That what a relief that is for the person and for you. And that's much more restorative than me calling you up when you haven't even asked for it. Often you get this response of, I didn't do anything to hurt you.
Yeah.
Or I get this response, they don't care, or they even may deny that they've ever done anything at all. And what a hurtful thing. That's just re-injury.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, and I guess that's one of the things that's really tough. And again, not to, I said I want to be transparent, but I think that's one of the things that frustrated me so much about my mom and dad. I was 4 when they divorced, and I always heard about how it impacted them. My mother always told me how my dad was and how it impacted her. My father and my stepmother always let me know how it impacted him. I Unless I'm blocking something out, I don't ever remember them either independently, certainly not together, saying, "Hey, by the way, Jason, how are you doing? How are you handling this as a 4-year-old, as a 5-year-old, as a 6-year-old, as a 7-year-old, 8, 9, 10, 11, only child, first great grandson, first grandson, now sharing with 2 step siblings, then 2 half brothers. Life changed very quickly, and no one ever said, how you doing? And I don't think, and now I've gotten to that point, kind of, I think I've reached that indifference standpoint that you talk about, Lee, to where I just, I have this feeling that if I ever brought any of that up, that one, it causes me to go have some emotions I just don't have anymore. I'm like, yeah, I'm pushing 50, 46 years old. And I just, I don't want to deal with that. And so I guess, that's one of the things I'm wondering. I guess so with my dad in particular, and again, my dad doesn't listen to this show, but if for some random reason he were, Dad, I love you. You're just gonna have to keep listening. But my dad has never come to me and said, man, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I acted that way. And so what I find myself in, Lee, is being that person that is having to, I guess, just act out forgiveness, but I can't go to my dad and go, "Hey, Dad, by the way, I just want you to know I forgive you for being such a jerk all those years." That would not go over well, Lee. So, is that what I have to do? Is just kind of going back to that my known reality of my dad, and know that for what it would mean to him to have to say I'm sorry, because man, then that's 46 years of
Mm.
admission of, I don't want to say admission of guilt, because it's a two-way street. My stepmother once asked me the worst question I think a parent can ever ask. She asked me, "Jason, do you think you've been a good son?" Now, uh, what kind of question is that? And uh, and so I'm sure I haven't always been the perfect son. I don't think anybody has, but so do I have that right with my dad, just to kind of just keep acting out in my heart, and then be ready if he were to say, "Hey, just want you to know, whatever I've done, I'm sorry, man," to be able to just love on him?
Well, you bring up the next thing. There are three other things I want people to do in the forgiveness process. The next one after announcing forgiveness is when I'm around that person, I want to treat them with the mercy of Christ,
Okay, yeah.
because I'm just going to be around them. I have to be around them different times. And so while I'm there, I'm just going to treat them in ways that they may have never treated me, but I'm going to treat them with the mercy of Christ while I'm around them. If I can't do that, then I'm going to move out from there, because I want to be good at that, treating them with the mercy of Christ. That, I think, is more powerful than anything I might say in the negative. The next thing is I want to look at myself and realize that the most difficult scars that I have are emotional scars, not physical scars. I was when I was young, before school, we would go up and down the dirt alley behind our house and catch something called tickle bees that I don't know what they were, but they're little tiny bees. They wouldn't sting you, and they would just tickle your hand when you catch them. And as I was walking along the alley, I wasn't paying attention, but there was a large dog on a chain in this backyard. And so it started running after me, barking, growling, hackles up. And so I started running toward the house. Well, I was pretty round back then, more than I am even today. And so I wasn't making any headway against that dog. And he got the back of my leg, and I got this huge scar on the back of my leg from that. And I remember that, but I still like dogs. I'm okay with that. But there are some deep scars emotionally that don't show to anyone else, but they show to me. I see, I know they're there. And I need to give these scars a greater meaning than, yes, that person damaged me. And I use this verse, it's a little obscure, but I think people will grasp it. It's Galatians 6:17, where Paul writes, "From henceforth let no man harm me. I bear in my body the marks of the Lord Jesus." Now, here's a man that the Bible tells us was given beating 39 lashes with a cat of nine tails multiple times. He had stripes without number, shipwrecked 3 different times, stoned and left for dead outside of Lystra. This guy had been beaten down. I don't suppose there was any place on his body he did not have a scar, but he's taking these, I think, and giving them a fresh meaning. The word he uses there for marks is a very unique word. It's the word stigmata. It's plural of the word stigma. And we use that word today in English. It means some kind of negative blot on your character. But at the time that Paul was writing this, it was the word that was used for a slave brand. And when you bought a slave at the auction, then you would either tattoo them or brand them in some way. And what that word was a stigma. So you can see why that came to mean a negative blot on your character. So I think what Paul is trying to do here is he's looking at these scars and he's saying, I bear in my body the slave brands that say, Jesus owns me. He owns me.
Yeah.
Why would he get back up after being stoned and go right back into Lystra? Because Jesus Christ owns him. Why would he keep going to the next town and preaching the gospel? Because there was a riot everywhere the man went.
Right.
He would do it because Jesus owns me. Why will I forgive someone who has hurt me and hurt me deeply? Because Jesus owns me. This is one of the tallest orders that God ever gives us, is to forgive. It's difficult. You don't forgive people that haven't hurt you. It's so hard, but yet that's the calling of God on us. You remember Peter went to Jesus one time and said, hey, how many times do we have to forgive? This is in Matthew 18. He said 7 times, which was the highest that Peter could even imagine.
Right.
And he says, even 70 times 7, Peter.
Yeah.
So, oh, that's a tall order for me.
Yeah.
If somebody out there doesn't struggle with forgiveness, please send me an email. Tell me how you do it, because I battle with forgiving people that have hurt me as well.
Yeah.
And then one last thing I want people to do, it's based on Matthew 6:21, that says, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. If you're in a relationship with someone and you're wanting to forgive them and they've hurt you really deeply, this is a key verse for you. Let me just think of it this way. If I invest money in a stock, I'm going to pay attention to that stock. I'm going to check it out from time to time. Hopefully not every day. I don't want to be obsessive, but I do want to check it and make sure it's making progress over time. Well, the most important thing I can invest in anyone is my time. I can get more money. I can't get any more time. That's allotted by God. So if I invest in this other person and I give them my time and my energy, then I believe that causes my heart to move toward them as well. And so I want to at least pray for this person who has offended me, and even pray God's blessing on them. Because ultimately, if God is blessing them, won't they come and try to heal with me?
Yeah. Yeah.
I really want to spend some time and energy blessing this person, praying for them, because that investment of my greatest resource hopefully will shift my heart in that direction too, and help me to be able to forgive. You mentioned earlier that sometimes there's a lady and she's got 3 kids and the husband's been unfaithful, and what does she do? And I talk to people in that very situation frequently. Sometimes you stay in a really difficult relationship for other reasons than it's a great relationship.
Yeah.
Kids to raise, you have financial security, you have all different kinds of things can motivate. I'm going to stay in this because this need is greater than my need to get out of it.
Yeah.
And I admire people who make that decision. That's challenging, but they also have to learn how to do a lot of self-care in the midst of that, because it's incredibly stressful to stay in a difficult relationship.
Don't I know it? And one of the things that you once said to me years ago, or you said in a session, because a lot of people will hear, let's say that you're the guy in that situation, and they're sitting down in Lee Poe's office, and the wife says, you say, well, why are you staying? And she says, because I've got these kids and I'm a believer. And never in that sentence is, and I love him.
Right.
And I remember, I was that guy saying, I'm staying because I got 2 daughters to consider. And I firmly believe if Jesus Christ were standing right here, he would not say, you need to get out of this. And so of course, the other party involved in this deal, again, trying to be respectful of all parties involved, was like, see, he never once said because he loves me.
Right.
And your response was, well, if the only reason he's staying is because of the kids, is there something wrong with that? Is that a bad thing? And I think that's what it's little things like that, Lee, that people need to understand, that there is some nuance to this. And if for that person is staying just for the kids, now granted, that can be damaging long term, but nevertheless, if that's what's piecing it together in that moment, yeah, right now I don't feel love for this person, but I have an incalculable amount of love for my children and my God. So I'm going to stick it out.
Sure.
That's not a bad thing. But I think that was one of the things that always stuck with me, because I didn't like the fact that I was only staying for what a lot of people out there would hear as legalistic duty reasons. No, it was just putting other things before myself and my own feelings. And you saying, is that a bad thing? That really, I know in that moment was very helpful, because you as the person trying to get to a point of forgiveness and trying to do the right thing, you question yourself, am I doing, gosh, I am terrible for just staying for all of these reasons beyond the other person. So I think that was really beneficial for me.
But you gave your girls a gift of having a stable home for a lot longer.
Yeah.
And that's to be admired and to be valued. Uh, yes, I know some relationships where it is truly unhealthy for people to stay engaged, and I recognize that happens, and I hate it. It's terrible. Divorce is very, very difficult on anyone. Even if you're the one choosing to get the divorce, it's still difficult. It's painful. Um, Hopefully, we can get back to the place of forgiveness, though, and be able to release the pain and hurt that has been brought into our lives by other people, and be able to move forward and choose to have a life that doesn't just focus back on all of that mess, and can say, hey, I get to move forward from here. I can have a life ahead that's valuable and worthwhile, no matter what somebody has done. And if I don't forgive well from the previous hurts, it's going to be really difficult to move forward with any other relationship in the future, because trust won't be there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can tell you, Lee, in my situation specifically, it's really, and this is for the listener, I can tell you that this is why I wanted to do this episode so badly with Lee here, and to really be transparent with you, because you've walked through so much of this with me, is that there's the Lord can, and we're believers. And if you're a non-believer, I think there's still a lot to be gleaned from this conversation, of course, but there is hope on the other side of this. I mean, because now the girl's mother and I and Jimmelin all co-parent swimmingly. I have no animosity towards the girl's mom. And and also I can say that as a believer, like I told Julie, I could not wait to come sit in your office and introduce you to Jimlin, to show you the physical manifestation of God's redemptive nature. And now that's not to say there's somebody out there that's gone through something like I did, and they're still sitting in the abyss. And for them, I don't know your name. You can contact me through jasonrightnow.com or whatever you want to do, and I will pray for you. But the bottom line is, I can just tell you anecdotally from my standpoint, releasing that. And then you got a choice. Like for me, I can either, this is the way I've kind of dealt with it as it relates to that relationship, Lee, is that one, I think that all those years prepared me to be, I always told Jimlin, she had never been married when we got married. And she is the closest manifestation of an angel on earth I've ever met in my life. She is absolutely the most incredible human being. And I get to call her my wife. And I told her, I said, you are the type of woman that deserves a man that has had some special ops training. And I am a Green Beret, Navy SEAL, Delta Force husband. I mean, I've had the special ops training. Doesn't mean I don't screw up. Doesn't mean I'm perfect. But I tell you what, I think it all, and I've got a choice. I can either be pissed off and bitter of all that had happened before, or I can look at it like that and go, wow. I went through that, but look where I ended up. I'm with you. And these girls have this amazing other mom that loves them. And it's so it's just, and then the thing with, I can tell you, my dad and I, when we went on this trip to Boulder, I prepared myself for it. And I just said, I told Jimlin, I said, when we get there, I'm going to try to make him laugh. I'm going to try to just, I tell you what, my dad, in a lot of ways, he's very heroic, as you know. I've told you before, he doesn't have his eyesight, and if you didn't know that he had macular degeneration, had no central macular degeneration, had no central vision, you would not know, because he's not going to let you. He's not going to talk about it. He's not going to ask you for help unless he just absolutely has to. There's so much heroism in that, and I've started to just focus on those things that make him so special. And it has been a struggle, Lee. And again, before I started this show, I knew, because I was just switching over the show from Texas Titans to this format of the Jason Wright show, with the motto being improve always and always. And I felt it on my heart. This was going to be one of those things where, I mean, I can improve in any number of ways, heavens knows, but this forgiveness muscle is one that it's a lot easier for me to go downstairs to the garage and rep out pull-ups till I throw up than it is to just release this forgiveness and grace. And so I had to imagine that I'm not the only one. And so that's why I wanted to do this episode so badly. And I'm so grateful for you bringing your wisdom to this audience, man. I'm so grateful.
My great pleasure. Could I address one quick thing?
Yes, sir.
What if I'm the one that has caused the harm? What do I do? I want to give you 5 quick thoughts on that. That there are 5 things that are part of making a really great apology.
Oh, excellent.
And I hope that you're really sincere about doing this if you're the one who's the hurter. First of all, it's showing remorse. That all of these start with the letter R, so it makes it easy to remember. I want to show great remorse for having hurt you. And that's when you can say, I'm so sorry for how I've treated you, so what I've done to you, how I've hurt you. The second thing is to take full responsibility. That's the R word there. I'm not going to bring up what you've done. Almost always in a relationship, the hurt goes both ways. I see that happen most often. So I'm going to take responsibility for what I've done. I did this and it was wrong. There's no excuse for having treated you this way. I'm not going to do what people often do, which is, well, I know I hurt you, but you did this. So leave that out. Just take responsibility for your stuff. The third R is restitution. The Bible is huge about restoring things to the way that they were. And sometimes that's easy. I broke a china plate one time that my wife had, so I got in touch with Replacements Limited and ordered a new one to replace it. That's easy. But when I damaged your reputation or hurt your feelings, that takes a lot more effort and a lot more just empathy and support. If I've been there for the hurting, I need to be there for the healing. That's one of the rules I have. Then the fourth thing is remediation. What am I doing now so that it will prevent me from hurting you like this again? And that may mean I get an accountability partner, or I'm reading some books or attending a seminar, any number, going to counseling, whatever it may mean for you to do that remedial work. And then the last but not least, and probably the most important, is I make a request for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I know I've hurt you so badly. Would you please forgive me?
Wow.
Now, if they're not able to do that, I have one more little lip on that, and that is, if they say, I just can't right now, then I'm just going to speak very gently to them and say, I understand completely. And I'm hoping that by my behavior, by my actions to you, that you'll realize how sincere I am in this change and be able to forgive me at some point in the future. And if I can do that, that can be really healing.
And also, that you just brought something up too. That person, should they put a timeline on the other person because that having been in the situation where it's like, okay, every step that you just said was followed, but then it was like, and now I need you to give me this forgiveness pretty darn quickly, because
Yeah.
that's what I want. So how do you help that person give the offended, that time that they're just going to need to heal and process?
I just have to work with them to realize how valid that is, that people don't forgive instantaneously. It just doesn't work that way. It is this process that they have to work through, and they will have relapses in their anger and frustration over time. They will.
Yeah.
So I'm working both ends of that stick so that we have the chance to say, okay, just be patient with them, allow them the time that they need to heal. Uh, your arm, if you break an arm, it's going to take 8 weeks to really get healed. So how much more so if we've hurt somebody's heart, how long that would take to heal. So it just is a process of working through it, realizing that need, and giving people time to grow through that grace and forgiveness.
So anybody out there that happens to come across this, Lee, that they hear us talk and they go, "Oh my gosh, I need some help. I need it right now." Is there a way they can reach you, or what are some good resources for that person? And even if it is kind of going back to what you just said, what if it's someone that's like out there and they go, I'm about to drop a bomb on someone I love very much, and I'm going to need this forgiveness. Whatever their circumstances, or it's a couple that's just entered this phase, or it's that son that's like, I want so badly but to give this forgiveness, or a daughter, whatever the case may be. Where can they find you? Where can they find other resources to start this process?
Sure. Well, I'm a part of Grace Works Counseling, which is a counseling ministry out of Green Acres Baptist Church in Tyler. And so that they can contact here. We do some Zoom counseling. It's still allowed. So we'd like to work with that if we can. But you can find great counseling centers all over the Metroplex or wherever you might be located, all over East Texas. They're great ones. So look for someone, interview them. It's okay for you to interview a therapist to find out their take on things and their polity, their understanding, because that's important for you to know if you're going to build a rapport with them, to work with them. It's okay to interview them, get to know them really well, find out what their take is. There are some wonderful books out there. Shattered Vows. Then Deborah Laser wrote that one. Torn Asunder. I think it's Carnes. There are just so many wonderful resources out there that you can check out. If you're talking to a good therapist, then they can give you those resources that they like and that they're familiar with. That helps you to work together through those. You can talk to your pastor. You can go to christianbooks.com and look up topics. There's just so many places you can go to really get some help that you need.
And one of the things I want to ask you before you go, because some of the people are listening to this, especially men, I think, maybe it's just my perception, but there's a lot of men that will say, I don't need counseling. I know everything they're going to say. That's not going to help me. Are there any statistics that you have for those couples that have been in a situation where they tried to fight the battle on their own versus and success or lack thereof based on these that actually go through an act of infidelity or an alcoholism, whatever the forgiveness doesn't just have to be infidelity, whatever
Sure.
the case may be, whatever the monster in the room is, the statistics of them making it through the marriage and the health of their children versus those who do not go to counseling. Are there some statistics that they can pull from to make that guy or gal that says, "Nah, not going to help me"? Well, then why are is there statistics to quantify that?
I'm sure there are. I wouldn't know them right
Okay.
offhand. I would say that the worst thing about that is the attitude of not willing to seek help.
Yep.
That's going to be the real problem. If I don't need help, but yet I'm the one who's hurt somebody desperately, or I have been hurt desperately, maybe that's pride getting in the way of seeking out someone that could really be of help and benefit to you. And I'm not trying to sell you on coming to me for counseling at all, because I've got a wonderfully full slate of people. I'm glad to work people in, but my goodness, um, I just want people to realize there is help out there. There are people that can guide you through a process that can be healing and actually move you forward in life and get you refocused again.
Fantastic. Lee, this has been awesome. It is just, well, I think I don't really think I'll ever know how awesome it is. I hope that, and maybe I'll never know and I don't have to, but I hope there's someone out there that heard this conversation. And if nothing else, what I just brought up to you there, I want people to know, the guy that has the podcast that is positive, and I have very few bad days, but I have a counselor. I have someone to walk through these valleys with, and that has been you for over a decade. And brother, I love you. I thank you for the wisdom that you have bestowed in not just upon me, but just all the many people whose lives that you have touched and you've helped. And I'm just grateful, Lee. I appreciate it so much.
Well, I really appreciate it and love you too. And I appreciate all that you're doing. And thanks for letting me have this opportunity to come on with you.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I'm going to do a quick sign off real quick, and then I'm going to come back and say goodbye to you appropriately. Folks, thank you so much. If you are watching this on the YouTube channel, and if you need any prayer, help, whatever the case may be, if I don't have the answers, and most likely I won't, I will do anything I can to point you in the right direction. So you can always reach me through my contact page at jasonwrightnow.com. If you're listening on the podcast, same thing, jasonwrightnow.com. And please click subscribe on the channel. Please give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. I am so glad that you joined us for this episode of the Jason Wright Show. I'm so grateful for Lee, your friendship, what you've been to me, and thank you for sharing your time with this audience. Folks, I'm Jason Wright, and I'm out.